And this is my hypothesis of why we're not seeing it in every child, because it depends. Did this kid have a weakened immune system when you went and threw this in the body? Or did they not, because they don't have any intolerances or allergies, and so the body was able to fight it off? Hi, friends and family. Today on Pam and the Purple Couch podcast, we're going to go straight into the world events of vaccines. That's right, I'm going to rip that Band-Aid off. We're going to talk about all of the news RFK Jr. is helping the United States especially become aware of. Now, what does that mean? Well, come on back to the Purple Couch podcast. We'll be right here to get down into the dirty of vaccines and the world of autism. So, yep, I'm going to talk about it. Finally, am I going to talk about this when nobody else wants to? I am, and I don't care, and you can hate me. You can put the thumbs down. You can put all of your jargon behind this. The only reason I say this, Manny, is because we know it's social media. We've talked about social media, so I know no matter what, you're going to have haters. I'm so upset right now because we just had a horrible shooting, another one in our country. And I'm seeing things on social media that are talking about, oh, well, good riddance, he's gone. I don't care if you like the person, if you don't like. We're in the United States where we have freedom of speech. And no matter one way or the other, it was a human being whose life was lost. Yeah. So there should never be, I'm glad that guy is gone.
Right.
Really? That's some self-reflection in the mirror you need to look at.
Yeah.
The reason I'm getting all revved up is because, as you know, I love this topic. I love this topic because finally, it's not just, hypothetical crazy non-vaxxers. So before we get started, I would like to say that I am for vaccines. Yep, I know. I'm about to have this discussion and we're all talking about all the news of vaccines versus autism. I am not for the preservatives that have been put in these vaccines that are given one size fits all to our children. Let me make it very clear. We need vaccines in our world right now. We definitely do. But they come with limitations and protection and true knowledge to the consumer. Example, we're dealing with all the COVID and vaccines and was this a real vaccine? Is this a not vaccine? The reality is that it should be personal choice.
Right.
You should not be dictated or mandated to put something into your body without you understanding the entire effect on the human body and then making an educated choice.
Right.
That's my stand. Stand on vaccines. It's how I feel. What I have a problem with and what I have, guys, somewhere around here is my book. 2 years ago, this book was released. So this isn't something that I'm just jumping on the train on. Thimerosal should not be in any vaccine, period. That is what you're seeing in the news right now when they're talking about the preservative. I'm calling it by its name. Why? Because even the CDC has acknowledged that there are adverse results of using Thimerosal, but they needed the shelf life because they had to weigh out the mass versus the few.
Right.
Well, when we went from 10,001 cases in the 70s to 1 in 31, 1 in 34, depending on the statistics, this is an epidemic in itself, and it's called autism spectrum disorder. So I bring this up because the flu shot. What people do not realize, right now the media is all looking at, the effects of autism and using Thimerosal, especially in the shots and the vaccines for our kids. Well, Thimerosal is still used in all the flu vaccines unless you specifically asked for a green vaccine. Hear that word, parents, a green vaccine. Okay? From someone who believes in vaccines, you have options. The green vaccine removes those preservatives. It has a shortened shelf life. That's what we should be using.
Right.
On the MDS sheets, so what those are, parents and non-business owners, is any chemical that you bring into a business. There should be a cleanup sheet, its toxic results, anything if it's ingested, how do you take care of it, and there should be a binder in your offices that have all of these sheets for any of the products, chemicals that you use. So the sheet listed for the flu vaccine states that if they're walking this into the local pharmacy, and it's being couriered. Here's this little case of vaccines. Here you go, Dr. Manny, we're bringing them in, and let's pretend you're the pharmacist. And I trip, and I drop this onto the ground. In that hazmat sheet, it says that the hazmat person, those people with the big suits on, the white suits, they are supposed to come clean that up.
Right.
So when I read that, oh my gosh, it was when I was working on my degree, so we got to go back some years. So that's how long this information's been there. So at least 11, 12 years ago, that knowledge was there, but nobody wanted to talk about it. So think about that. Hazmat must clean up because of the level of mercury that's within the Thimerosal as a shelf stabilizer. But yet we're going to go inject our kids.
Yep.
We're injecting babies. We're talking about babies of different sizes. A 15-pound baby, a 12-pound baby, a 24-pound baby. But guess what? Ching, 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 ching. We're just going to load them up with the same shots. I don't know about you, but the last time I went to the doctor, they had that thing called the BMI, and this is where you should be, and this is where you are, and this is the, Okay, well, what happens with that with our youth?
Right.
The next part that comes into this is we have to also think about what else is the body handling at that time. So when we talk about autism and vaccines, guys, can you tell I'm a little passionate on this one? And it's because when Loki got diagnosed, we were in a financial situation that we could have alternative testing done on our son. So my son, who didn't live in a home built prior to 1970, the mom who didn't have any dental work done while she was pregnant, who had never been exposed to any levels of mercury, his blood test and his testing we had done in France came in that he had elevated levels of mercury. I still have his big, huge 3-ring binder. I kept everything from his shot records to as soon as we knew something was going on. And many of my listeners, I know we're all in the same boat, and that's why you found this podcast. Now we finally feel vindicated because, okay, someone's listening to us. In 2008, I believe it was when Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy did the walk on D.C. I was there. Those are the things that we're talking about. It was like, guys, something's got to give. Now we're in 2025. Why did we go from 2008 to 2025 before people started to notice?
Yeah.
That's the concern we have. Now, 70s, 1 in 10,000. It was 1 in 185 when my son was diagnosed. Now we're at 1 in 31.
Yeah, it feels like we didn't move fast enough as a globe, in comparison to like polio or even the measles, something like that, and AIDS.
Yes.
It was like a world.
Oh, no, I'm going to stop you there because I'm going to disagree on the AIDS one. I think
we could have moved faster.
So, nope. I honestly, and this is going to, in my gut, I can feel my medium, he's not even here, my manager of marketing going, oh, Pam, did you lift it? And yes, I'm going to. Do you know why AIDS wasn't handled the way it was supposed to? Because it was a gay community problem when it first came out. I'm going to say it. I grew up in that generation.
Yep.
I remember Ryan White, okay? It was a gay community population until the Ryan White case came out.
Right.
Until it got media and it got professionals standing behind this child that was being targeted. And it was, okay, wait a second, this is no longer the gay community.
Right.
Okay? That's when it started to get its traction. Same way with autism.
Well, Magic Johnson, too. The whole Magic Johnson thing.
Absolutely. It took a celebrity before anybody paid attention.
Well, and I think that's why I said that, because anything like polio, which still to me took a long time to get the polio vaccine, but and then when you look at AIDS and you look at the publicity of it, I don't think autism, I don't think developmental disabilities in general have gotten the mass publicity as other things.
What did you know of autism? Rain Man.
Right.
Let's be real.
Right, yeah.
No, if we're going to talk about it, let's really talk about it. Yes.
And it was called something else, yeah.
In the Reagan era, we didn't even understand mental health until they started shutting down VA hospitals. And then the mental health patients that from the shut down hospitals ended up being homeless. And then it became a society problem because they had to see it.
Well, and even before that, it was a quiet problem because they were calling it psychiatric problem.
Correct.
And they were going into and then it was a quiet, it was hush,
Correct. So all of our children, unless they were savants or comorbid diagnosis meaning more than just autism, did you consider someone with special needs autistic? Our high-functioning autistic children, I'll be honest with you, I think about Elon Musk and reading his biography and his story and the bullying and the physical abuse that he went through as a child being different because they didn't see that as autism spectrum disorder. It wasn't, we don't talk about that,
Right.
In our families that we help in the Middle East and in Asia, it is still that same, it's the cognitive, oh my goodness, I put shame on my family because my child has a mental disability. And again, disability instead of difference.
And I think that goes back into the subject of the vaccinations. Why so many feel compelled to vaccine versus not and kind of lack that information or get the level of information to make an informed decision. There's avoidance. Right,
Yes.
Their escape avoidance of a potential problem if they don't do the vaccinations,
What about the social media? Nobody wants to know because I don't want to be one of those people that they blow up. That you're an anti-vaxxer and you're the one that's going to call. I mean, I've seen it. The hate that's out on social media.
And it's just like any other bullying tactic or any other tactic where there's a side that wants everyone to be on that side. It's let's promulgate the issue, right? Which is to blast wrong data, false data.
It's not even the autism vaccines. Let's also talk about COVID vaccines.
Oh, yeah, COVID vaccine was
Let's think
another
about
one.
that. When COVID was going on, if you didn't get vaccinated, how dare you? You're a horrible person. You don't care about anybody.
They wanted people non-vaccinated to stay home.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I did not get vaccinated. Let you all know that. In a population of teachers and families that have dealt with the vaccine problem from autism spectrum disorder and all of I watched what happened to my child wait a sec, hold on. So you're telling me the MMR vaccine, all the vaccines I gave my son who have been around for decades, and the CDC already acknowledging, even back then, that Thimerosal can have an adverse reaction to certain people. Okay, that's decades of research.
Mm-hmm.
All right, families, we'll be right back after this special message. At Bridge to Tomorrow Foundation, we are there filling the gaps that federal and state funding doesn't do for all of our neurodivergent families. There's educational, therapy, and support services that are available to our families, but most of them can't afford those services. We need your help today in helping us fund the future for those children. We need a gap, a bridge to get them to where they need to go. So today, help us help them be our future. And now, back to the Purple Couch podcast. I was in China in the fall of 2018 into 19 when all of this, or 19 into 20, you get what I'm saying. That fall before it hit the U.S. where we did the shutdown. And we had a vaccine within 6 to 9 months. No, I'm sorry. I was not going to mandate that because, again, it is a personal choice. And I should not have to dictate to my staff, my families, that I'm going to come and take the personal health choice away from you.
Well, one of the things that I'm hoping, because we haven't seen the
end result
of the RFK Jr. Data.
But is it going to be skewed, or if it's going to be real data?
But one of the things you mentioned about like Loki, when when he was coming of age and whether to vaccine or not, is you were looking at, and this is good science terminology, right? All the variables. So BMI, blood work, other illnesses or other biological factors, neurological factors. So in good science, there's you take in all the variables before you make a decision of whether to do the intervention.
Yes.
If the intervention is vaccinate or not to vaccinate, well, what are all the variables at play? So if And we have seen history proves it. So there are people that are allergic to the polio vaccine, that are allergic to the COVID vaccine, So why wasn't that taken into account? Because they just did the mandate. They just followed the mandate without getting all the variables.
What are you talking about? I was that mom. So I had 5 miscarriages leading up to conceiving Loki. And I mean, it was enough that we even rented one of the baby things so you could hear the heartbeat because of the trauma that the miscarriages had left. So when we finally conceived and I was carrying Loki, I did everything the doctor said to the T. I was hyper vigilant. I did mama yoga. I cut out sugar. The only sugar I had was from anything orange. Anything that was orange, peaches, anything that was that color, that was my jam. But when the doctor said, this is what we recommend, yes, sir, no, sir, because I grew up in a generation, you don't question the doctor and you don't question the teacher. So I did everything he said. But then when things started misfiring with Loki, and when my son disappeared, and I went in and I'm like, something's wrong. Oh no, he's not screaming and yelling, and I'm like, what? So then that's where it leads you to go to Dr. Google.
Right.
And then you have to start researching and finding out this information for yourself.
Right.
That is the key of all of this. But there is still also the social pressure that comes into it, and especially right now when we're thinking about all of these things that are coming into play with our kids, we start to think about those social pressures.
Yeah.
And parents have been programmed to do what the doctor says and what the teacher says. We're in a society now, this is the pros and cons of social media, where you start to question the internet and having the availability of resources that we didn't have back in the day.
Yeah, right.
It gives you access to knowledge, but it still should be the right of the human. Example, didn't realize until my 30s, I was allergic to raw egg. So when you were talking about there's some people allergic to these things. So if you read in the flu vaccine, it says if you're allergic to raw egg, you should not take this vaccine. But if you don't understand those things, then how do you know to make the best decision for you individually?
Right. And I think that comes into the play of, do you have a doctor that is unbiased, that is scientific? Because if you have a doctor that says, oh no, we absolutely require vaccinations, it's probably not the right doctor. Right. I'm sorry, because the doctor should be a scientist. A medical doctor is learning science, is learning data and facts to guide their decision making. So if a doctor or the doctor's practice says, oh no, all our patients must be vaccinated, then are we working with the right data? Versus they say, oh, all of our patients get thoroughly tested, thoroughly evaluated, and then a decision plan is made in place for the right vaccinations.
So I love that. That is the key. That is, in my head, you have to understand that a child cannot get tested for allergies and they're 2 to 3 years of age.
Right.
24 to 36 months. So, logically speaking, you can't test a child to be allergic to anything until they're 2 or 3. But yet at 1, we start pumping our children, whether they're going to be in a daycare or at home, no matter what of the environment,
right,
we're going to put chemical stressors into their body.
Right.
Now, what I found in writing my paper, and it was the effects of Thimerosal on the body. That was my paper, was that when you take children, what are we doing at 1? Let's just think about this in the development of, at a 1 year, what does the pediatrician say? Oh, well, you could start introducing cereal. Yep. You can start introducing, when you're making up the rice, and you're making the little, or baby food, and start with something bland.
Even milk. I think even milk.
Oh, yes, they recommend that now's the time to start getting them into whole milk. Wait a sec. So how do you know my kid's not allergic to any of these items?
Right.
How do you know my kid's has a casein intolerance and can't break down the protein in milk? How do you know this if you can't test them for that? So the body's already trying to regulate. We have this little beautiful baby trying to regulate to these new food sources. And then all of a sudden we throw these outside chemicals into them.
Yep.
The body's already beaten down. So why is this not affecting every child if it is such a bad thing?
And I think that's an important factor too. It's like we have seen, and with Loki included, right? We have seen children diagnosed with autism, and legitimately so, diagnosed with autism for all the right, variables, with vaccinations history and without a history of vaccinations. So the whole notion of vaccines cause autism, there is no scientific data that says there's a causation. And the reason for that is all the variables.
Yes.
There's so many variables that go into why someone has autism or has ADHD or has whatever. And I think that's an important aspect for parents to understand, is what are all the variables, so that you can understand what is truly the causation factor of it versus just making a
blanket statement across. Because when we make the blanket statement, it's just like saying that, all neurodivergent people need assistance.
Right, which we know is not true.
That's not true.
Right.
When I have been pinpoint in conferences and like, okay, Pam, so do you believe in vaccines? Absolutely. Yes, but you say, and I was like, yes, but hold on. Let me explain what's going on with the body. So if you go back to that little baby we were talking about that's getting the new food, trying milk, trying wheat, we're literally affecting the immune system of the child. So the child is already fighting. Let's say they do have an allergy, something that we're not aware of because we can't test it until they're 2 or 3.
Right.
But we're introducing new foods. We're introducing new proteins to their bodies, and then we overdo the body, and now we're going to throw. So if that child didn't have an allergy to the milk, didn't have an allergy to the cereal, didn't have an allergy to, what's one of them, banana. That is one I see in all infants. It's one of the first entries. Let's try a little bit of mashed bananas. So whether you're buying baby food or if you're mashing the banana itself.
Right.
Think about those little sucky things when the kids are starting to teeth. You put the fresh fruit in there so they can gnaw on it. You don't know. Strawberries. How many kids have we met that have had allergies to strawberries? You don't know these things until you can test for it. But while the body is weakened, then what are we doing? Let's throw some chemicals into them. And this is my hypothesis of why we're not seeing it in every child, because it depends. Did this kid have a weakened immune system when you went and threw this in the body? Or did they not, because they don't have any intolerances or allergies, and so the body was able to fight it off?
And you mentioned preservatives earlier in the vaccines. You got to think about all the stuff that gets put in the food. So if you are fortunate enough and have an economic status that you can buy nothing but organic stuff.
Correct.
You're in that elite 1 to 5% of the society. But what about everyone else? So it could be that those of us that can't afford organic food and we buy the stuff that's not organic, what are we pumping in the body in terms of our food? And that could be a factor.
And that's where we go back to, why hasn't this hit mainstream? Right. And it didn't hit the correct people. And once it started, that's when you started seeing it in the media.
Right.
When we started seeing celebrities that had children that started to be affected by this, you started to see it more in the media.
Right. Yeah. And then also, I think, I hate to say it, but I think also, always follow the money, right? So once medical doctors started doing heavy research, pharmaceutical companies started doing heavy research on this, and they started publishing more and more and more, that's when you started getting even governmental attention to it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So we got to wrap our episode up. I could talk to you parents about this forever. Why? Because for me, especially in our home, we have started looking, our high schoolers are working on regenerative farming. Why? Because our soil is dead. You started talking about the preservatives in our food. I had to put my feet on the ground here because that hurts me so bad, because this is another one of those issues that's coming into play with the vaccines is, all right, our food contamination and what we're putting in our body goes straight to our brain.
Yep.
So if we're weakening our body by what we're consuming and then we're adding chemicals on top of it, guys, we've got to wake up.
Yep.
We got to wake up, because this isn't getting any better. This whole episode today for me was to bring knowledge to the forefront and tell you to empower yourself. Before you just trust the doctor and put these foreign chemicals into you or your children or your loved one, ask them, is this, number one, a necessity? Why am I being mandated to do this? And number two, is this something that could retroly affect my child? Meaning, maybe not right now, but in a month from now, are they going to have a counter reaction to the vaccine? What are that wonderful page that nobody reads that states, oh, these are the conditions. And oh, by the way, it could cause blah, 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 blah. Guess what? It's your baby. This is the time to read that. This is the time to give yourself knowledge, because knowledge is power. That's my tidbit as we wrap up today.
Yep. My tidbit would be just gather all the facts, get all the right data, understand all the variables at play to make some just key database informed decisions.
Correct. And remember, friends, family, this is your choice. It's your decision. There are ways for you to avoid the vaccine mandates if your school requires them, if you don't feel safe. There are elongated shot schedules, which I personally recommend. So my personal recommendation would be green vaccines, recommendation. I'm like, that word just got me.
Right.
But if we would have, the two things would be green vaccines, that eliminates the preservatives, and number 2, an elongated shot schedule. Yes, you may have to go into your pediatrician once a month, but it still gives the human body time to catch up to everything that it's developing with. So guys, please make sure you hit the like button, share this with your friends, and hit subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you all back on Pam and the Purple Couch podcast. Bye guys!